This is Nicky G and welcome to Better Commander. Today we're going to talk about mana acceleration, but we're leaving Llanowar Elves at home with Legolas and Arwen because we're leaving green behind for this video. Since the beginning of Magic the Gathering, there's been a very high bar for mana acceleration, the indomitable, inimitable Birds of Paradise. I personally own a bunch of birds, and if I'm making a commander deck with a partially green color identity that wants mana, spoiler, all decks want mana, then I probably want a Birds of Paradise. I get psyched whenever I see this little bird played, and whenever it gets reprinted, I usually buy one. But what if we're not running green? Well, up until recently, I at least considered the metallic Myr, including Palladium Myr. You see, mana dorks don't have haste, but they can block, carry swords, or be sacrifice fodder. Mana dorks definitely have their place alongside some of the more traditional mana rocks. There are two types of mana rocks, at least in my mind, fair and unfair. Fair would be the signets, including Arcane Signet, the talismans, 3 mana rocks like Commander Sphere, Chromatic Lantern, cards like Felwar Stone, Mind Stone. Then we have fast mana like the Moxes, Mana Crypt, Jeweled Lotus, Sol Ring to an extent, but Sol Ring is so cheap and just goes in every commander deck, there's really no arguing about it at this point. These cards are fine if you have them, and I have no objection if you run them in your decks, but we already know that they're good, and often they cost an arm and a leg to run, and they tend to ramp up the power of your commander deck, sometimes above what your play group is running currently. Which is fine, there's nothing wrong with this, I just tend to save them for more powerful decks. I also want to mention here the medallions, which are fantastic cost reducers. These are also very expensive. If you own one of these and are running a monocolored commander, it's a solid include and will pay for itself very quickly. But what about my newest favorite card, Ornithopter of Paradise? This is a mana dork that taps for any color, is a flying blocker, and an evasive attacker if you suit it up. You can have Birds of Paradise in any deck. Except it costs 1 more. But worst case scenario, this will power out our 4 mana value commander on turn 3 and fix our mana, which is kind of what we want it to do. But artifacts are very vulnerable, so if you're running a bunch of mana rocks, there's an entire suite of cards that can take out artifacts en masse. So we're talking about Hammer Mage, just kidding. We're talking about Vandal Blast, Heliod's Intervention, Bane of Progress, cards like that. I did just want to highlight this art for a second. I love this guy. This guy's menacing. He looks like Santa Claus after he gets sick of everyone asking for a PS5. Look at the townsfolk in the background. I mean, they're horrified by whatever this guy's about to do. All right, back on track. Non-green mana acceleration. So what if we lean more into spell slinging? There are really powerful commanders that can use instant or sorcery cards better than a mana dork, and that's when we start to delve into rituals. So red and black kind of have the best rituals. I'll talk about a few. In red, there are quite a few, but the best of the bunch is Mana Geyser in a multiplayer game. Mana Geyser is 3 red for a sorcery. Add red to your mana pool for each tap land your opponents control. In a multiplayer game, this can get upwards of 15, 20 mana. Also a little slept on in token decks is a card called Battle Hymn. If you have a copy instant or sorcery sub-theme in your deck, these cards can get out of hand. Cards that make tokens like Kaikar can really benefit from a card like this as well. Any token deck, really. So Battle Hymn is 1 and a red for an instant. Add red for each creature you control. Wow, so this is a hot take. Jeska's Will is good. It's both a ritual and impulse draw if you have your commander on the field of battle. I would say run it in any deck you can, but also it's a little pricey at the moment. Treasonous Ogre lets you trade life for mana. This guy can be a Real House in a Suicide deck or a Greven deck, or any deck, honestly, because you start with 40 life. Treasonous Ogre is 3 and a red for a creature, Ogre Shaman. It's a 2/3. It also has Dethrone. Pay 3 life, add 1 red mana to your mana pool. Simian Spirit Guide sees little play in commander, but this can be powerful in the right decks. So Simian Spirit Guide is a 2/2, 2 and a red for a creature, Ape Spirit. Exile Simian Spirit Guide from your hand, add red. So if you start with this in your hand at the beginning of the game, you're essentially up 1 mana. The Darkest of Dark Rituals in black. It's a classic. Dark Ritual is a niche card that provides a big burst of black mana. Culling the Weak is a good one in a deck that wants to sacrifice creatures. So Korvold lets me call a goblin token and pop out this little pitiless plunderer, then loop everything and play solitaire for 20 minutes. So sacrifice works here as well. So Culling the Weak is a instant sacrifice a creature, add 4 black mana to your mana pool. I do love this art as well. The little eye patch goblin looks really bummed out. I mean, it's pretty dark. He's about to get sacrificed and made into some black mana, so even his ears look a little sad. Black Market is a great way to generate mana in a deck that anticipates lots of creatures dying. This has been a little outclassed in recent years, but really used to be a commander staple. It's 3 black for an enchantment. Whenever a creature dies, put a charge counter on Black Market. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, add black to your mana pool for each charge counter on Black Market. In any deck where you're using heavy self-mill, Songs of the Dam might be a good ritual to use. Songs of the Dam is black for an instant. Add 1 black mana for each creature card in your graveyard. Look at this weirdo. Priest of Yawgmoth is 1 and a black for a creature. Phyrexian Human Cleric. It's a 1/2. Tap, sacrifice an artifact, add an amount of black mana equal to the sacrifice artifact's mana value. You can activate this in response to targeted removal or after tapping a mana rock to power up your big Exsanguinate. This is a pretty cool card and one that people kind of sleep on. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Bubbling Buck, which is a great card. It's a color shifted high tide for the black decks out there. Then we have some relevant mana doublers, Cryptghast and Nirkana Revenant. Both of these cards are fantastic to include in mono black decks, and you're going to get a lot of bang for your buck. So black also has some combo lands and some classic lands. Crypt of Agadeem helps you generate mana off the black creature cards in your graveyard. We have Cabal Coffers and the inferior Magus of the Coffers. I'll mention Cabal Stronghold, which is both better and worse than Cabal Coffers in that it can tap for mana, but only cares about basic swamps, so it doesn't interact with Urborg. So while I'm on the subject of lands, before we go into our next color, Terrain Generator is great for any monocolor deck that runs a fair amount of basics. This is land ramp outside green, so we like that, and it just takes up a land slot. So you can tap to add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool, or pay 2 and tap, put a basic land card from your hand into play tapped. Alright, on to blue. Blue has the original High Tide, which is a card that goes crazy in my Orvar deck, especially if we copy or recur it. I've used Energy Tap in a couple decks. I had it in my Savin deck. Savin was never integral to remain untapped, so he wasn't attacking or anything like that. This could help us cast our bigger spells and X spells in that deck, and once I cast this, I was usually going off to win. There are several mana dorks that can help us cast either instant or sorcery cards or artifacts. And if you're in one of those archetypes, take a look at Curious Homunculus, Unblinking Observer, cards like that. So Curious Homunculus I've had in a couple decks, and it's pretty awesome when it transforms as well. And then for artifacts, you have a Soldevi Machinist and or Vidalcan Engineer. These are 2 awesome cards to power out our artifacts. One of my favorite cards of all time is a little card called Dreamscape Artist. So Dreamscape Artist is 1 and a blue for a creature, a human spell shaper. It's a 1/1. So you pay 2 in blue, tap it, discard a card, sacrifice a land, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle. So this guy basically turns every card in your hand into a Harrow. And he gets us lands. He acts as a discard outlet in decks that want that, like Runo Stromkirk, Mimeoplasm, any Reanimator deck. I think this card is awesome. Moving on to white, and as we all know, white ramp is a bit more limited and relies on artifacts and search your library for basic plains effects, but only if another player has more lands than you. So if you're running a mono white deck, depending on your theme or archetype, you may want to consider Loyal Warhound or Knight of the White Orchid. These cards help you play catch up with the Omnath player at the table and are respectable includes. So Keeper of the Accord is a pretty awesome card. I'm surprised it's not more expensive. So this triggers on each opponent's end step and can get us multiple planes. So it's 3 and a white for a 3/4 human soldier. At the beginning of each opponent's end step, if that player controls more creatures than you, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token, which is of course useful. At the beginning of each opponent's end step, if that player controls more lands than you, you may search your library for a basic plains card, put it onto the battlefield, tap, and then shuffle your library. And then we have Archaeomancer's Map, which is a fantastic include in an artifact themed deck. So it's 2 and a white for an artifact. When Archaeomancer's Map enters the battlefield, search your library for up to 2 basic plains cards. Reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, if that player controls more lands than you, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. This is a fantastic card. It's basically draw 2 plains and it can ramp you as well. Smothering Tithe is a fantastic card. The problem with Smothering Tithe is that you have to take out a mortgage to buy a copy, and everyone seems to know that this is a fantastic card, and they will absolutely burn their only removal to take it out. Monologue Tax is a light version that won't make you as many treasures, but will help you catch up when players start double spelling on turn 4. Monologue Tax is 2 and a white for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, you create a treasure token. It's a pretty decent card. So you have a lot of recursion with cards like Sevinne's Reclamation, Sun Titan, that can get us discarded lands and or fetch lands or our destroyed mana rocks out of the graveyard. So Sevinne's Reclamation is 2 and a white for a sorcery. Return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So that would include lands. If this spell was cast from a graveyard, you may copy this spell and choose a new target for the copy, and it's got flashback for 4 and a white. So back when I first started playing, Solemn Simulacrum and Burnished Heart were classic includes in non-green commander decks. So they're getting outclassed a little bit by cards with lesser mana value, mana rocks these days, but Solemn Simulacrum is a classic commander value card. Burnished Heart still sees play. I have one in 2 decks right now, and is a great way to burst ramp outside of the green color identity. I also wanted to highlight a couple artifacts that are a little pricey right now, but great in aggressive decks, and those are Sword of Hearth and Home and Sword of the Animist. Both of these get lands onto the battlefield and are as cheap as they're going to get right now, unless they get reprinted at common or something. But right now you can get both for 16 bucks or so. That's not going to stay like that. These are both $20 cards. As my final piece of advice for this video, I would say buy one of each. You definitely will not regret it. So I sincerely hope this video has ignited some Planeswalker spark within your brewer's heart. There are many ways to make mana. Let's give the old Llanowar elves a break, right? Let the birds of paradise land and eat some food. Let's think outside the cereal box and surprise your friends with some cards they've never seen and witness your newfound power. This is going to be Nicky G from Better Commander, signing off.